With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Let's Talk About Sex.
I am your host, Estela Rodriguez-Jebril, licensed clinical therapist and the Muslim sex coach. We are live here on Sky Channel 752 and across Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And you too can join us in tonight's discussion and get advice simply by calling through the studio on 01924 231 083. And remember, standard network rates apply. So please ensure that you have the bill payer's permission before calling in. And why not join us and share your thoughts via WhatsApp, all in confidence and confidential, by messaging 079 5079 7017. And this is our very first ever Let's Talk About Sex episode. And I want to acknowledge that this is a difficult subject for many. It's a tough subject to discuss. It's a very tough subject for me as well. Well, I have to say it was a very tough subject for me. As I was raising my children, my 3 children are now adults. And I realized that not only did I need to educate them about sex for prevention, I needed to educate myself. And I did so. And I strongly urge all of you to allow yourself permission to view the topic of sex from a new lens, a new perspective. So let's talk about how we talk about sex as Muslims. Sisters and brothers, sex is that which cannot be named subject within our community and among Muslims. Yes, the topic of sex creates this uncomfortableness and maybe even an emotional charge from within. And this is why it's so important to be able to broach this subject, this topic. And we've already had so much engagement in Facebook. There was a brother who shared that, frankly, the subject of sex isn't taboo in Islam. And that's correct. It's not a taboo subject. We know that it's part of life. So we have to be able to educate ourselves, create more comfortableness. There are hundreds of hadiths, he says, which discuss this topic. And he also shares something that's very true. It's a taboo within the Muslim community due mainly to cultural reasons. So we want to be able to really discuss this subject because at the rate that we produce children, you would think that it was a topic that we could broach. And we know this is not so. And this is harmful to us as individuals and as a community. Something as deeply intimate as sex has the profound ability to either heal or harm. There was also a younger sister in Facebook who shared that I think this is a very important topic and it deserves to be talked about. We especially have to discuss this subject openly with respect because our young people are facing so many more tribulations out there in the world, so many more tests. So with misinformation that's out there in the world, what chance do our young people and our newlyweds have at establishing a good footing at the beginning of their marriages? And what chances do our single sisters and brothers have at staying mentally healthy about the topic of sex? There is so much information out there that's being thrown at our young community. We live in a world that tells us exactly what sex is about. Whether you like it or not, this is the truth. Undressed women on gigantic billboards across cities. There's pop culture that's encouraging young women to degrade themselves, and young men being told that the more notches on their bedpost, the better it is for their manhood. And these are just a few examples. We have a brother on Facebook that is saying, Islamic channel, really? So as Muslims, we feel uncomfortable about this topic. But yes, this is a topic that is happening in the bedrooms across the world, whether you're Muslim or not. And Muslims are having sex. You know, we have to be able to have these conversations in an honest way. We need honest discussions about sex and sexuality, because sex is not purely carnal. It's sacred. We know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls us only to good. Yes, we are not being disrespectful. We are not being vulgar. So how does stepping into what is good, how does that translate into the topic of the bedroom, into the topic of sex? Is it really a mystery? Is it really a mystery? Do we keep it a taboo subject when we know that there are so many distractions for our young people, for everyone, actually? So without honest discussion, we're not going to know what is normal and what is healthy in a marital relationship. We're not going to even know what is normal about sex if we don't talk about it. You know, there's so much conversation out there that is testing everyone. We already know that so many states in the United States have passed same-sex laws for same-sex marriages. This is another topic. We're not going to go into this too deeply today, but as Muslims, we know our foundation. And if we don't talk about this subject, you know, where is that going to lead us? Why are we ashamed? There's a brother that's saying, you know, you should be ashamed of yourself. You should, you know, we're being told that we should be ashamed for speaking about this. No, this is a natural topic that we want to be able to have a respectful, honest discussion so that our brothers and sisters out there, they know what is normal and they know what is healthy and they know how to navigate through the challenges, whether married or whether single, and that they know how to navigate through the sexual, emotional charges that we get daily. We're energetic beings. We're human beings. We get attracted to each other, you know, and some people are continuously being stimulated and they don't know how to navigate. They don't know how to navigate through these urges. So if you don't know what is healthy, how will you know what is not healthy? I'll tell you that I have worked with many brothers and sisters who grew up in families where they were sexually abused by those close to them. This is one of the main reasons why we have to talk about sex and sexuality and sensuality, because it will prevent harm. It's important to be able to have this discussion. Why all the secrecy and hush hush when it comes to these matters, to the bedroom matters, to sexual stimulation? We know that it is not a shameful subject. We know that our prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, he never intended for there to be silence and suffocation about the topic of sex. There is a place for the sanctity of the bedroom. There is a place for us to have respectful discussions. There's a brother that is sharing that this is a hot topic. Yeah, it is a hot topic. And if you are bothered by it, if you are somehow getting some emotional charge from this topic, then that's right there, the number one indicator why we have to be able to normalize this topic. Our children are being taught in public school what sex and sexuality is in a way that will lead them astray. I've worked with so many teenagers right now in the past 3 to 6 months that are struggling with their gender identity. And we know as Muslims, we have our perspective about gender identity. We know what the worldview is, and we have to stay within the confines of our deen, our foundation, and our children, our teenagers, our adolescents, our young adults, and grown adults for that matter are struggling because they're getting these messages from the media, from society, from higher education that doesn't give them the ability to understand and clarify those feelings for themselves. So we're getting lots of viewers worldwide. Hello to the brothers and sisters that are joining us and watching us from Kashmir. Yasmin is watching from London, and keep your questions coming. We need to engage. We need to have a conversation so that the silence and the suffocation about the topic of sex is normalized. Not normalized in a way that we're all going to become promiscuous. No, because we talk about sex, it doesn't mean that everyone's going to become promiscuous. And this is the biggest fear, I know. When I was growing up, my parents didn't talk to me about sex. Why? Because I thought I was going to go out and have sex. And when I became a parent, I actually had that fear too. And I realized that I had so much confusion about sex and sexuality because I didn't talk about it as a teenager, as a young adult. And it was my responsibility to be able to educate my kids. And if you don't take on that responsibility, then there's going to be so much more confusion, so much more tribulation, and many of it that is connected to sex and sexuality is preventable if we have a respectful discussion about it. There's a WhatsApp question from an anonymous sister, and she is saying, I am not sexually fulfilled in my marriage. I love my husband dearly, but I have a higher libido than him and don't know how to approach this topic. I'm devoted to him and our intimacy is meaningful, just not sufficient. And this right here is a great example why we have to talk about this subject. Clarify libido meaning, I want to clarify what libido is. And libido is just your level of excitement, your sexual excitement, your level of need, your level of, so I want to summarize the question. And she shares that she's devoted to her husband and she loves him, but there's just no meaning, not enough meaning where she is sexually satisfied, that she has a higher libido, that she has a higher need for intimacy and for sex. Now, for us as women, broaching this subject with our husband is such a delicate conversation. And if we don't talk about this, we won't educate each other on how we approach it. And there's a variety of reasons why some people have a higher libido, a higher need for sex and intimacy, and some people just have a lower need. So we have just a little bit of time left in this conversation, and I know there's so much to cover. So I want to be able to just normalize this so that we can talk about these needs that sisters have, the needs that brothers have, the needs that our young couples have. It's a conversation that we can have in the most respectful way. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intended for the union of marriage to be one that is full of bliss. So how do you create that bliss when there are huge differences between the man and the woman? You know, we always hear that it's the man who has a higher need for sex and sexuality, for intimacy, the one with the higher libido, but that's not always the case. So if we don't talk about this, then we're not going to know what natural sexual impulses are, and that it is just a human being experience. We need to establish a higher level of comfort with the topic of sex. When there's a discussion, let me go into WhatsApp. I have a question. A sister is saying that she, actually, it's a brother that's saying that he suffered trauma last year and he was raped by a woman, and that she pretended to love him, and that the wedding was stalled. So this was such a traumatic experience, and he lost his virginity this way. And this is another very important question. And brother, I really just acknowledge you for your vulnerability and for sharing this, because many times we stigmatize, you know, and we have this conception that only women get raped. No, men get raped, women get raped, children get raped. And we need to be able to talk about sex and sexuality so that we can prevent. We can be preventive. If we can educate, then people feel more prepared and they can ask the deeper questions that allow them to not fall into this perception that, you know, there's something wrong with them, or that they can't, you know, express themselves. It is something that we've just ignored. And I know many of you may be, you know, triggered by this conversation, and it's going to bring up trauma. And I want you to know that there are resources for you. If you feel that you've been triggered, or you're experiencing some kind of, you know, emotional negative charge because of this topic, I want you to reach out for support and reach out for help. And you can reach out by connecting with BritishMuslim.tv /support. So I want to just clarify that again. And if you've been triggered, or you feel like you need support, reach out to BritishMuslim.tv /support. So the concept that, you know, only men can enjoy intimacy, or men should enjoy intimacy, you know, is a falsehood that we have to be able to talk about. The notion that only, you know, men can cause harm on women by taking advantage of them and forcing themselves on them is false. You know, we have to be able to discuss intimacy and sex and sexuality to educate ourselves so that we can prevent hardship, so we can prevent. There's an anonymous sister that is sharing. I think it's great that you're raising these points. Thank you, sister. I received that acknowledgement because I know that I'm putting myself out there, and it's so important to engage. So thank you for acknowledging that. She's asking to touch upon understanding one another's needs. Talking about sex with her partner has transformed their sexual life. Yes. If you're in a marriage and you can't talk about sex, then that's just asking for your world to be turned upside down. When you can openly express to your partner what your needs are, when you can openly explore, we know that our beloved Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, spoke about the importance of being playful with each other and understanding each other's needs. Yes, it's so important to be able to cultivate a level of comfort, a level of normalcy, so that we can openly talk about and educate our community about sex and sexuality and intimacy to improve the lives of our married couples. There's a notable sheikh who described that marital intimacy is a taste of Jannah. Yes, marital intimacy is what gives you that taste of what Jannah is. And if you haven't experienced that, then, and you're married, then this show will, inshallah, give you some insight to the possibilities that are available to both partners, male and female. So how do we cultivate a community of sisters and brothers that are grounded in their own sensuality, in their own sexuality, in a healthy way, that pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that avoids trial, avoids tribulation, avoids harm? It's by discussing it. It's by talking about it openly. So yes, it's a little bit jarring, a little bit triggering, because we don't often talk about this subject openly like this on such a platform like British Muslim TV. So this is such an opportunity. This is such an opportunity to really step out of our comfort zones. So I'm getting questions about what's permissible, and that they've asked, mufti, there are some muftis about persons that talk about sex and ask questions. So it's yeah, sometimes, our scholars aren't even familiar with the levels of sex and sexuality and how to discuss it. There's also another aspect of the question where he's asking, but should we talk about oral sex and the stages of sex? As long as we can do it in a respectful manner. We're not going to be disrespectful. We're not going to, to make, this something pornographic or something vulgar. No, we have to be able to keep in mind that, yes, we are Muslims and we want to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that there are many aspects of sex and sexuality that need to be discussed. And there are many schools of thoughts. I am not a scholar myself, but I do study all of the schools of thought that are connected to sex and sexuality, because I get a lot of questions. And there are many different views specifically on oral sex and stages of sex. And then we know that in the Quran, we are explicitly told what is not acceptable. We know what is not acceptable. So therefore, everything other than that is acceptable with different degrees, without pressure, so many young men and so many young women are so embarrassed to talk about this subject. If we're embarrassed as adults, how are we going to educate our younger Muslims? So, there is so much to talk about, and I'm going to be here every week discussing the topic of sex, the topic of sexuality, and I want to be able to discuss this in the most respectful way. So if you have any questions which you want to put forward for next week's show, then please message us on WhatsApp. Thank you again for watching this edition of Let's Talk About Sex, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. And I am your host, and along with the whole team here at British Muslim TV, thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us. Assalamu alaikum. This has been such a pleasure, and I'm just grateful and honored.
With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Let's Talk About Sex.